Hey, what's up, comic book collectors? It's Christopher, aka the Bronze Age Nerd. And have you ever been bitten by the FOMO bug? Have you ever decided to buy a book that was on the Key Collector Trending 20 or the CBSI Hot 10 list? And have you wondered how that book will hold up over time? Well, then this is the video series for you. Every 2 weeks, I do a video series called Top 5 Not to Buy, where I take a look at those lists and I decide on 5 books that I wouldn't put my personal money into for that week. As I developed that series of videos and people started criticizing some elements of it and saying like, hey, you know, you're just hating on these comic books. It's easy to say don't buy these. What I decided to do was to create a 3-month later look back at those prices. So this is for the video that I put up on October 22nd, 2021. Yes, I'm still a little bit in a lag trying to catch up to those older videos. We're getting closer though. And that was a fun video. If you haven't watched it, I'll put a link above. That was a video where I kind of did this thing where I pretended to be an alternate universe version of myself that was sort of the opposite of me, that was more of a comic book hype man making top lists, and you know, as a parody of kind of different elements of stuff you see like that in the community. And so when I made that video, I kind of did some fun looks at some books that were on those lists, especially some stuff from the 90s, which is kind of interesting. And so when we're going to look at this, we're going to go back and look at cover price, because that's the comic book price guide that you guys voted on for my channel. And then I'm also going to look at eBay sold listings to kind of give us a second point of view and see how those books perform. Okay, so first up on this list was the Santa Claus book, Marvel Holiday Special #1 from 1991. This is the book where Santa Claus is a joke in the book. Basically, was suggested to be an Omega level mutant, and there was speculation that we're going to see that happen or something, which I think is a little silly. But anyways, let's take a look back at this. You can see right there, Santa revealed to be an Omega level mutant. The current trend of this book is up less than a percentage point, and I have no graded sales, so we're just going to go straight to the raw comic book sales for this book. Definitely something that, you know, plays out on the tape here. We are going to go look back past to October, but really this book has kind of been all over the place. It looks like it did kind of trend up, which is important to note. And so we'll go back to October 22nd when this book was getting talked about. Really, if you go back and look, you can see that even before that video came out and before it was on the list, there were a couple higher sales and also a couple lower sales. But what we're going to see is, and this is raw, so the condition is a little bit all over the place. It comes up with these numbers, and I don't have information on how it arrives at the numbers, if that was listed in the listing, if it was my comic shop, which does really fantastic grading. I'm really not sure. But we do see that it was selling anywhere between $6 for a mid-grade, apparently, $5 for a mid-grade, possibly, all the way up to like 20, 30, see 32. And then in November, different story. In November, nobody wanted that book. In December, when you would expect actually I would think demand would spike for it, nobody wanted that book. And then in January, I guess some people felt nostalgic for Christmas and were willing to pay $10 for a 6.0. Yeah, market really dried up on this one. Let's go look at eBay sold listings. So eBay sold listings lets me go back as far back as December 12th. I'm not really sure what sales looked like before that, but boy, it's there was no reason to invest in this book back in December. You weren't going to be paying off any of those dividends. Do get a fine, very fine, sold for $16.45, but that was from the UK. Boy, there's an outlier if I ever saw one. $50. We see the book starting to sell for a little bit more, which is interesting. So if I go back and look at this book at the 6-month later mark, it'll be interesting to see where we're at in this book. But I think I can safely say that this one was not necessarily a book you needed to invest in 3 months ago. All right, so next up on the list was Fantastic Four 358, and this is the first appearance of Pybok the Power Scroll. You know, people are speculating that we're going to get more scrolls in the MCU. That makes sense. And apparently Pybok was one that people believed in. Currently, we see this book is down 13%. This one we do have some raw and graded to look at. Quick look at the graph. You can see a couple spikes there that are almost certainly outliers. Okay, we see the book selling for $7.50, $3. We look in the month of November. I think the high mark here I'm seeing is $12, another $12, and then a 20, 15, 20, 18. And then in January, 20 there, a lot of, 7, 5, 8, there's an 18. So presumably those are fairly high grade copies is what I have to infer from the data there. I guess that there's some movement here, but it's interesting how many copies are going for half of what these high sales are. All right, but let's look at graded. 9.0 sold for $100 in January, but 9.2s sold for $56 and $40 in January. 9.4s sold for less than that in December. Weird. 9.6, there we go, $66. Okay, so a 9.8, which is surely the grade that people would look for on a 90s book. We range from $100 in February to $325 in October and $350 in January. So actually that's not too bad. That's really interesting sales data. So if you had a 9.8 of this, maybe it was worth submitting it to CGC. Okay, so we're gonna go back and look at eBay sold listings. I can go back to December 11th when raw copies were selling for $12.99. The 9.6 accepted best offer less than 60. A lot of cheap books. So let's go forward, you know, $17.99. 9.4 sold for $26. A lot of best offer accepted here on CBCS 9.8s, and $10. You know, maybe it creeped up a little bit in the raw. Now we're seeing 13, 12, 13, 9, 12, 25. So it's creeping up a little bit. And then let's look at most recent sales. $13, $6. Hell, this $13 one was signed by Tom DeFalco. The $6 one was a newsstand. So this book went through an interesting progression. I think at a point closer to the 3-month mark, it did go up. So maybe it was a good buy. And I think the overwhelming important piece here is I bet you a lot of people found this book in back bins at comic shops. They found it and it hadn't been repriced or whatever. That probably was a really good investment, because if you were buying it for the $15, $20 that it was going for because it was on the Key Collector Trending 20 list and all that kind of stuff back then in October or early November, you probably weren't making much money on it. Because if you're selling it now, you're getting your money back. And when you find a book like in a dollar bin, if you find it for cover price or whatever, it's a different story. That's always a different part of the equation than if the comic books are going for significantly more, you know, the FMV rate. That's where I advise, like, don't buy it at FMV. Again, that's advice for myself. In fact, there's a book on this list that I bought copies of since this list came out, because I found them for $1. Okay, so I did take a look at another book on this list that's Fantastic Four. This is Fantastic Four 66. This is the origin of him. Him is obviously the character that eventually becomes Adam Warlock. You're talking about a Silver Age Fantastic Four book. It's not the first appearance of Adam Warlock. It's not the first appearance of him. And so my advice was, you know, why buy that book when it's at its hottest? It's a Silver Age Fantastic Four book. Probably should wait and wait for the book to cool off. That was my advice. Let's see how that paid off. This book is currently trending 3.5% down, basically. But when we look at raw, huge spike there in February. Something had to be going on. In October, we saw the most movement on this book by far. 22nd. By the way, grades are going to be all over the place, so this is almost meaningless. I just want to point that out ahead of time. 90, 30, 60, 100 plus a couple times. Back down. In November, we saw 100 plus sale. In December, we saw 200 plus sales. Other than that, they're selling for much less. So let's look at graded. And I'm going to kind of see, you know, I haven't looked at this before. I'm opening this up right now in front of you. I'm going to look at what seems to be the most common grade. Let's take a look at 7. Oh, actually, this isn't too good because we only have one sale kind of recently, but we were seeing it sell from 250 to 372. And then it sold for 384 in February, so it didn't really move. Let's look at 7.5. 420 basically to 500, and then in January it sold for 372. So that's down. 8.5, we're talking really high grade for a Silver Age book now. I don't have a lot of data to go off of here, but it looks like it doubled in price in an 8.5. I think that's kind of telling me that depending on the grade, depending on the sale, you could have made a little bit of money on this book. Okay, so eBay is again letting us go back to December 11th. Let's see, best offer accepted, $90, 42, 26, 35, 78. So, you know, kind of in the range that I would expect, honestly, most Silver Age Marvel books, you know, from the main titles to kind of go for, honestly, depending on the grade, especially if they're kind of a, you know, a minor key. And we're coming up into January now, and 43, 38, 229 for a 4.5, $200 for a 6.5, 500 for an 8.5, and less than 400 for a 7.0. So interesting sales data here. Now we're getting past the 3-month mark, but I think I'd stand by my advice, and maybe you interpret this data differently. If you think I'm wrong on this, let me know in the comments down below. But for me, it's like I'm not making tons and tons of money back here. The only way I could have made a lot of money back is if I got a good deal on a high grade raw copy, submitted it, and then sold it. which is totally valid. Generally speaking, though, for Silver Age books, that's good advice anyway. But I don't think that this book is exactly taking the world by fire here, by storm or anything like that. I think that it's just sort of doing what it does as a Silver Age minor key. But I think you could have invested in some different Adam Warlock books and probably made out better. That's my opinion. Okay, the fourth book was Youngblood #2, the first appearance of Prophet. Full disclosure, this is a book that I did buy 2 copies of because I found it in a dollar bin, and I think that I can sell it for more. Specifically, we're looking at the pink logo version. It's also the first appearance of Shadowhawk, but I'm going to look at the pink variant here. Let's look at raw sales data, October 2021. So you can see, we'll just take a quick look. This book was going for no more than $10 before that. A lot of people jumped on it once it showed up on the Key Collector Trending 20 list. All throughout that month, we had the Prophet news that Jake Gyllenhaal was going to play Prophet. And this book, for sure, will see a resurgence when we get like a trailer, when we get, some get closer to a release of anything with Jake Gyllenhaal as Prophet. It will for sure go up. Now, will it go up a ton? That's hard to say. It was a highly printed book. There's a lot of copies that people have been able to score really cheaply. It doesn't really look like it, a 9.8 raw, which is interesting. Sold for $56, but the rest of these, 5, 10, 5, 10, 10, 15, 15. I just don't think that this book, from raw, is looking like it was a great investment. Let's check out graded. A book like this, I think, you have to look at 9.8s, right? October 2021, 130 to 365 and 400. Those are definitely people that bought around the time that this trailer, that this news dropped, I bet. But in December, somebody bought one for 180. And since then, they bought it for like 150 or so. Let's check out eBay. And with such a heavily printed book, we're just going to see tons of listings. So I'm going to go back as far as I can, and then I'll kind of hop around. Here's that $56 high grade 9.8. Interesting. So I'm going to go forward a couple pages. This gets us to February, $10, $3. That's the green logo, though. We're looking for the pink. 15. So I think possibly what we're seeing here is that this book dried up a little bit. Copies aren't as available on the market because there is something that with scarcity that happens, and this is something I've like Journos has talked about this quite a bit. If people aren't actively selling their books, so it's not on Macari, it's not on whatnot, it's not on eBay, then even if there's 8 million copies out there, the only copies that really matter to a buyer are the ones that are available to buy. So this one, it's an interesting case where I'd say that, yeah, you might have made a few bucks on it, but also if you're selling it now, you're selling it at the wrong time. That's just how I look at it. And I think that long-term people will find out that book was a decent investment, which is kind of interesting. So let's just kind of say that this one is a kind of almost a wait and see, slash you could have made some money on it if you bought it for lower than FMB. But then again, people were buying it for 15, 20 bucks, and we see, sales of 15 or 20 bucks now. So kind of an even Steven there. Okay, last book on the list is Convergent Superman #2. This is a book from 2015 that was the first appearance, the birth basically of Jonathan Kent, who later becomes Superman as we know now. This book, first appearance of Jonathan Samuel Kent, Prime Earth as a baby, which is kind of what I didn't like about this book. Baby first appearances they do okay, but they're never as good as the first appearance of the character in costume, that kind of thing. So looking at the raw data here, and we were looking at the A cover, not the variant. You can kind of see the tail of the graph here. When I made this video, this book was selling for $38, $40. So it had already kind of seen an increase. But, before that, it was selling for 25, 30, maybe as low as 20 a couple times. And then after they made the video, it's still 40, 20, 35, 26, 20, 20. 20, 33, so kind of back down to normal, really. We do see $46, looks like a high water mark there in January. So let's look at graded. Most average grade for this is 9.6. So let's see what kind of data we see in a 9.6, even though I think a 9.8 would be more realistic for this book. 200, basically 195, and then 300, 295 in November. That's pretty interesting. And then don't really have a close sale, 300 to 825. That's a big jump. Let's take a look at eBay. So we have $25 is the furthest back sale that I see, and then 25. That's weird. Okay, so that's a signed book for 255 and a 9.8. 25, 40, but it has both issues, 60, but it has the variant, 25, 20, 33 from the UK. You know, it seems like it's holding pretty steady in a raw. The graded books, 300, 330, also signed by Lee Week, so that's a huge drop from the other one. Let's take a look. There's one more page, I believe. 30, 45 for both, 30, you know, 12. So I think that this for raw copies, totally flat. Oh, interesting. 985, but it was a best offer accepted. 175, 245, 125, 220, best offer accepted on 85. Yeah, what I'm seeing on this book, from the data that I'm looking at here, it looks pretty flat. Before I moved on, I'm not gonna do this for every single book that pops up because it is kind of an extra kind of hoop to jump through, and I don't want to make these videos too long. But there is this site, 130point.com, that a viewer turned me on to look at eBay sold listings. I'm pretty sure this stuff's pretty accurate. I think they can scrape it somehow from eBay. Conversion Superman 2, this is that 985 best offer accepted sale, and I really wanted to dive into that one. It looks like that's the one that sold for 825. That's interesting, but that is also an outlier, but I definitely wanted to provide that data point. So where I'm at with this book is I think that this isn't too surprising. I think raw copies are staying pretty consistent. I think if you had a 9.8 contender, you probably submitted to CGC. Probably a lot of people are waiting to get those back. There might be some scarcity on the market for the copies that have come back already. And I do think that in 9.8, eventually this book is probably going to prove to be worth it. I think in a raw, though, I don't think it's going to end up being worth it, especially if you end up with something that's kind of a, 9, 9.2, 9.4 or something in that range, and it's not a CGC submission candidate. You can see 9.6s are selling for incredibly cheap, but they're selling for barely more than raw prices at times. So you could also just go buy a slab and hope that 9.6s increase in value someday. This is a character who's going to potentially have a very long shelf life. But when younger readers or viewers of, like, say, Superman and Lois, for example, want to look for this character's first appearance years down the road, this book could surprise you. So I think that maybe, if you kind of wait and decide when you want to buy it, maybe it's a good decision to buy if you can end up with, like, again, one of those 9.6 slabs or something like that, or a decent raw copy that's for a decent price. This character, I think, is going to have some ebbs and flows in their popularity as time goes on. So interesting stuff. Let me know how you think I did. I think this one, there's a couple on there that were a little bit more iffy, but at the end of the day, those books haven't shot up. Like, I don't think you were making tons and tons and tons of money on those books. I think there were better books to invest in if you invested in some books that were cold at the time and that have heated up since then, or some Silver Age stuff that isn't necessarily have a spotlight on it that could heat up. You probably were going to do a little bit better. I just think there were better uses for my money, at least during that time frame, than buying those books. And again, like the Youngblood 2s, I bought 2 because I found them in dollar bins. That's a perfectly fine price to pay for pretty much any comic, really. So there you go. So that's how I feel like this video went. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Don't forget, there are plenty of links in the description as well, where you can find discounts like on Gemini comic supplies. You can head over to dangerouswaterscomics.com and save some money over there. You can save some money on cleaning and pressing over at Turlock Comics. All kinds of discounts available below. You can also join my Discord, sign up for my posts on Instagram, Twitter, any of those places. All that stuff's in the description. Thanks so much for the support, everybody. And I want to remind you, as always, hey, 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 hey. Read comics every day.